Welcome back. Ever since I was a kid, basements have always terrified me. It wasn't just the darkness, the cold, or the close, musky air. It was the fear of the unknown, of the unseen horrors that lurked within those gloomy depths. In my childhood home, the basement was a place of mysterious allure. I had always been warned to avoid it due to its decaying structure and pest infestation. But one day, curiosity got the better of me. The steps creaked under my feet as I slowly descended into the abyss. A dim light bulb flickered, casting wavering shadows that danced along the walls. As I stepped onto the cold concrete floor, I heard a sound that froze my blood. There in the far corner, a pair of red eyes glowed ominously. I bolted upstairs, slamming the door shut. From that day, I swore never to return. The images of those red eyes haunted my nightmares for years to come. Years later, in my own house, I found myself facing my fear of basements once again. It was an old building, and the basement served as a storage area. One evening, I went down to fetch some old books. The single bare bulb, hanging from a frayed wire, cast an eerie glow. As I sifted through the books, I felt a sudden chill, like icy fingers creeping up my spine. I turned around, and there, amidst the dust and cobwebs, I saw an old mirror I didn't recognize. In the mirror's reflection, standing right behind me, was a tall, dark figure. I whipped around, but there was no one. I raced up the stairs, locking the basement door behind me. But every time I closed my eyes, the tall, dark figure from the mirror stared back. In my last house, the basement was a laundry room. One winter's night, as a heavy snowfall blanketed the world outside, I was in the basement loading the washing machine. As I turned to leave, I heard a soft thud from the far corner of the room. Startled, I turned towards the sound. To my horror, I saw a trapdoor in the floor, slightly ajar, that I had never noticed before. Fear gripped me, but I forced myself to approach. As I crouched to examine the trapdoor, a cold gust of wind whooshed up, extinguishing the light. In the brief moment of utter darkness before my eyes adjusted, I felt something brush against my ankle. I screamed, scrambling away. The lights flickered back on, but there was nothing near the trapdoor. It was as if I had imagined it all. After that night, I never went into the basement again. The fear was too real, too raw. But still, every time I closed my eyes, I could feel that phantom touch on my ankle. To this day, basements still terrify me. The memory of those red eyes, the dark figure in the mirror, the cold touch in the darkness, they still linger, like silent ghosts in the depth of my mind. Basements, quiet, hidden, and dark, they are the perfect dwelling for the inexplicable, the uncanny, the fears that sit deep within us. They hold stories of terror, stories that can curdle your blood, and make you question what truly lurks in the dark corners of your home. In my old family home, the basement was an unexplored territory. My parents never gave a reason, but they always kept it locked. However, when I turned 18, they handed me the keys, their faces pale and somber. Descending into the basement, I felt an unnatural chill. A single cobweb-covered bulb hung in the center, casting an ominous glow. At the far end, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. A strange, unsettling feeling washed over me as I reached for the doorknob. Inside was a small room, empty save for a chair facing the corner. On the chair sat an old, creepy doll, its eyes staring blankly at the wall. The room's air felt heavy, and a sense of overwhelming sadness hit me. Something terrible had happened here, something I could feel but not explain. In my college dormitory, the laundry room was located in the basement. It was a practical place by day, but after sundown it became unnerving. One evening I was doing laundry alone. Suddenly I heard a low, muffled sobbing. Looking around, I saw no one, but the sobbing continued, growing louder, closer. I felt a cold touch on my shoulder, and I spun around only to find nothing. I left the laundry room, abandoning my clothes. From that day, I never stepped foot in the basement after sundown. In my first apartment, I discovered a stack of old VHS tapes in the basement. Curiosity piqued, I dusted off my old VHS player and began to watch them. One by one, the tapes showed normal family events, birthdays, holidays, and such. But as I neared the last tape, I saw something that sent chills down my spine. In the tape, I saw the previous tenant sitting in the basement, talking to an empty chair, his face filled with fear and pleading. The more he talked, the more desperate he became. I never found out who he was talking to, but his fear was real, tangible. After that, I couldn't help but feel an unseen presence in the basement, a presence that wasn't friendly. To this day, those basement stories send shivers down my spine. The creepy doll in the forgotten room, the unseen tenant in the laundry room, and the dreadful tapes of the previous tenant. These experiences have instilled in me a lifelong fear of basements, the chilling memories forever etched in my mind. When I moved into the lonely house at the end of Riverton Lane, it was because of a dire need for solitude and a desperate search for a fresh start. The house, though worn by the years, held an old-world charm that I found inviting. What I didn't know was that it also harbored a deeply buried secret. The first week passed uneventfully. I spent my days cleaning and restoring, making the old house a home. However, as the days passed, an unexplained uneasiness crept into my heart. One evening, while I was dusting the living room, I stumbled upon a small, rusty iron door tucked away in a corner behind a bookshelf. It was the entrance to the basement. An overpowering, musty odor wafted out as I descended into the dimly lit space. It was a small room filled with discarded furniture and boxes of what seemed like a lifetime of forgotten belongings. As I started going through the boxes, I discovered they were filled with old journals, letters, and photographs. They belonged to the house's previous occupant, a woman named Evelyn, who had lived alone. I found myself being drawn into Evelyn's life. She spoke of her solitary existence, her words filled with a haunting melancholy. However, her entries began to change, taking on an increasingly disturbed tone. She wrote about hearing strange noises, whispers in the dark, and feeling an unseen presence in the basement. Her final entry was unsettling. She spoke of a shadowy figure she'd seen in the basement, a figure that filled her with a bone-chilling terror. She ended the entry with a desperate plea. "I must leave. This place is not safe." An icy shiver ran down my spine as I closed the journal. A sense of dread filled the basement, making the air heavy, the silence more oppressive. Over the following days, I too began to experience strange occurrences. I would hear an odd rustling sound coming from the basement late at night, whispers that echoed in the silence, and an inexplicable chill that seemed to originate from the basement door. One night I woke up to a low, persistent thud. It was coming from the basement. Summoning all my courage, I decided to investigate. I descended the wooden staircase, the thud growing louder with each step. As I reached the bottom, the sight before me made my blood run cold. There, amidst the dusty furniture, stood a shadowy figure. It was hazy and seemed to flicker in and out of existence. It was standing still, facing the corner, its posture mirroring the one described in Evelyn's diary. As I watched, frozen in fear, it began to turn towards me slowly. I bolted upstairs, my heart pounding against my ribs, and slammed the basement door shut. I moved out the very next day, leaving the lonely house and its eerie basement behind. To this day, the memory of the shadowy figure in the basement haunts me. The whispered warnings of Evelyn, the rustling noises, and the figure. They still send chills down my spine. The house at the end of Riverton Lane remains a chilling memory of the true horror that I experienced in the basement. It was a chapter of my life that I walked away from, but could never truly leave behind.